Hey friends. So, another great session this morning with a client, student, client, friend. Um and and something came out. This sort of like emerged from the conversation. And what I realized that this wasn't necessarily a new insight for me, but it reminded me of something that is inherent in the process of essentially all domains. Like it happens in spiritual practice, it happens in creative work, it happens pretty much wherever you want to look. And the what came out of the conversation was we were talking about the work we've done up to now, what some of the outcomes have been of the work so far, and we've loosely landed around the term liberation. In other words, shedding restrictions, directing our focus where we want it to be, and arriving at a place where it feels like we can really move forward in that we're liberated. We're no longer encumbered by the patterns, by the commitments, by the things that kind of hold on to us and seem to whether it's illusory or not, seem to keep us held in place. And then in looking ahead to the next year, it was my client who offered the term or the thought, the next year is about actualization. And that was when it zinged for me that when we talk about, and when we're on the path of spiritual growth, and this even reminds me of like Hermann Hesse's book Siddhartha, or any kind of great spiritual text, spiritual narrative. There's a sense sometimes that liberation is the final endpoint. That if we could just get enlightened, somehow everything else, the rest of life, the rest of the world, the rest of the universe, everything that happens after that just takes care of itself, because now we're liberated. And we've become accustomed to viewing liberation as a destination, as a sort of end point of our spiritual practice. And what my client was basically articulating, and what it reminded me of, is that that's absolutely not the case. Liberation is not the end point. If anything, it is the culmination of a certain phase of the spiritual process, but probably in many more ways, it is the beginning of what comes next. Like, what does it mean to be liberated? That means to have choice. Liberation means we're no longer in bondage. We're not in the thrall of our own patterns, of our own restrictions. We've dissolved those enough, maybe not perfectly, and in fact, if you look deep enough, we're not even trying to dissolve all our patterns. I don't want to dissolve my pattern that tells me to look both ways before crossing the street. Why would I want to dissolve that pattern? It's a perfectly good pattern. It keeps me from walking out into streets where there's cars coming. I'm going to keep that pattern, right? We're not dissolving all our patterns. We've dissolved the ones that are restrictions and that don't serve us. And so we have a choice about what to do with our time and energy. That's what liberation is. Liberation is the is the start of choosing with an intentional, in a really intentional way, what we want to do with our lives, what we want to contribute, what we want to create, what we want to experience. And so actualization comes after liberation. Now, this may seem very, very obvious, but it's worth remembering if we're on especially when we're on a really rigorous and kind of disciplined spiritual path, it's worth remembering that treating liberation like an endpoint is kind of missing the point. It's kind of missing it's missing the point of the process. I remember I was on a spiritual retreat years ago, and I think we were asked to come up with a word or a short phrase, a couple words to describe what we were going to take home from the experience. And the phrase that came to me was manifesting enlightenment. Manifesting enlightenment. So in other words, what does an enlightened being do? What do we do with our time and energy? And FYI, I'm not claiming to be an enlightened being, but the context of this retreat and the place we were putting our focus as far as learning what our patterns are, learning to dissolve them, learning that is not the last thing that we do, learning that there's a lot of road left after even if we do manage to reach the point of liberation. That I think that's there's an expression called the gateless gate, which it's often sort of like this is coming from a book that I read years ago. I can't even remember. Can I remember? I think it was called Enlightenment is the Darndest Thing, or Enlightenment is the Damnedest Thing, written by a spiritual teacher who clearly had a small community, I think somewhere in the Northeast. Not like one of the crazy cult people who did this, but like sort of like under the radar, just like, deeply spiritual master type person, had a small group of people working with him, and he had an expression called the gateless gate. Because, the way I interpret that is we treat liberation, enlightenment like a gate. Like once I get through that gate, I'll be there, whatever there is, right? And before we reach that place, all we can do is have mental, imaginary kind of figments of our imagination, fantasies about what that looks like, what that is, what that experience entails. But once we go through the gate, we realize there was no gate there. There was actually no gate there. Life just continues. We're still here, and what needs to be done in the world? It's like the old Zen expression: before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. Life just goes on. There is a difference between being liberated and not being liberated. Otherwise, there would be no reason for spiritual practice. There'd be no, this is going somewhere, and the work of dissolving our conditioning, the work of understanding our karma, the work of connecting with what it is we have to process. To me, it's the heart. It's the heart of much of where my focus goes, because even the mechanism that I've kind of highlighted over the last couple of days, which is I feel in my body. I woke up again this morning it's like I digested another giant volume of energy and had to physically process, physically integrate that. So that work is going somewhere. It's not that it's just, we should just like lighten up. why are you meditating all the time and doing all these physical, what are you doing with your spiritual practice? Aren't you just really kind of like pretending that you're connecting? It's not, cannot be dismissed. And at the same time, it's not the be all end all. It is not the final thing. There's not the end. And this only came, in my conversation I had this morning, this only came out sort of in a brief kind of summary type of way, but it reminded me really powerfully of the fact that this is really how it works. This is really enlightenment, and releasing ourselves is a hugely important and very, if that's where our focus is going, it's a good place to keep our focus. And actualization, what we do, is ultimately that's not gonna stop. That's gonna keep right on going. We're gaining measures of control, we're gaining measures of consciousness, a measure of autonomy, a measure of freedom, a measure of choice. It's like our capacity for choice keeps expanding, and the work just keeps going. I feel this in piano practice too. I've been playing piano for 90% of my life, 95% of my life probably. And the thing that has changed, it's a path that every day that I show up, I'm still walking that path. I'm still moving. I'm gaining. There's no day when it's like, okay, done learning piano. I've done it. I've learned it. Now I'm just going to keep, now I'm just here, and I just get to keep expressing this thing that I've now learned. That moment never comes. I gain measures of choice. I gain measures of autonomy. I gain measures of capacity, measures of freedom, measures of expression, and that expands every day. And then continuing to express and continuing to actualize also continues every day. So I just think that's, for those of us who are intent on the kind of path of liberation, it's just a nice reminder that we can also allow our focus to shift onto the doing, to shift onto actualization, to use the choices that we're gaining the capacity to make for something tangible right now, and not imagine that there's some gate that's coming that we're going to walk through that's going to all of a sudden be the end. Anyway, that's what has hit me this morning. Thanks for watching, folks. Appreciate you. All the love in the world. I'll see you soon.